the quickest way to think about the difference between borderline, narcissist, and schizoid is a little Gestalt thing that I invented called the interpersonal Gestalt.
Right, yeah. It's in your book, yeah.
Yeah, it's in my book. And I had the same office for about 45 years. Beautiful office. I set it up so it didn't look like an office. So people would come in and I would say the same thing to everybody. Hi, welcome, glad you're here. Welcome to your first session. You can sit where you like. I'll be sitting here. And don't be afraid to move a pillow or move a chair. There was a sofa, there was a velvet chair, there was a rocking chair. There was a lot of different seating options. And I said, make yourself comfortable. If you'd like to sit further or closer, feel free to move your chair. So it was simple like that with a lot of freedom. And then I watched what people did and what they noticed. I finally found patterns about what people noticed, and I could sort people into 3 loose groups about what they made foreground when they came in this room, about me and about the room. And my borderline, and I'll ask you about it. For short, my borderline clients made love and nurturing primary. So when they came in the room, I had knitted a hand knit Afghan. They'd be talking about the warm. It was a very warm room. I had not warm in the sense of hot. I had a fireplace. I had wood paneling. It was a 12-foot ceiling. I had a wall of books. I had a zillion framed diplomas, really, and certificates. I had 2.5 walls of them. The narcissists always notice them.
Okay.
Now, I sometimes, so I paid attention. What did they make figure and what did they make ground? That's a concept from Gestalt psychology that was integrated into Gestalt therapy. My borderline clients made love and nurturing and warmth figure. They'd say something to me like, oh, this is such a lovely room. You look so friendly. You know, you have such a nice warm smile. I feel comfortable here. Or if they were, you could have been a very damaged borderline and you wouldn't be so effusive with me at all. You would have a different entrance, but it would be about assuming that I wouldn't like you instead of it being an optimistic borderline. So in any case, the narcissist would hone in. I'd watch someone come in and it was a townhouse, which we've since sold, that when we first bought it, we were stone poor. It was a horrible neighborhood when we bought it in a great location. You really had to be tough. We were broken into all the time. Now I'm a fancy lady. We had gradually taken over the building. And so now they're my narcissist clients would come in, be very impressed, but they wanted to know how impressed should they be. So they'd look at me and they'd look around, and I don't dress fancy and I don't have an it bag. So they would start to estimate the cost of the furnishings and they wanted to know whether I rented or owned. And they would try and find some subtle way of telling me. And they would hone in on these diplomas that were facing them. And they'd sometimes get up and look at the diploma to see what it said and where it was from. And I have a diploma exercise. So they were very fixated on my status. They were trying to make a hierarchy of how impressed they should be with me, not how comfortable they would feel, like the borderline. Now, what did my schizoid clients do? Well, first of all, they seemed to like that I told them where I was, first of all, that I would be sitting here. But I didn't find that out till later. They would sit either near the door or wherever they thought I was telling them to sit, or they would have trouble finding a seat, or very, very far from me at an angle out of direct vision, unless they thought the chair opposite me was where they were required to sit. Now, I didn't give any requirement. I gave a lot of permission. So to give you an example of there was a man this is how long ago this was. He was wearing a three-piece suit. I don't know that some of you have ever seen a three-piece suit with a vest. That's how men went to work at some jobs. And so he's a lawyer in a three-piece suit, very superficially friendly, confident. But when I invited him to sit where he wanted, I saw a funny look go through his face. And I felt comfortable with him. You know, he was obviously a high-functioning guy. And I said, "What's that? What do you think?" You know, he says, "You really want to know what I'm thinking and where I want to sit?" And I said, "Yeah, I really do want to know." He says, "As far from you as possible. Could I take my chair to the hall?" Okay. What's his diagnosis? Schizoid, turns out. He was a very high functioning guy, but he had been intruded upon. He hadn't been overtly abused or neglected. His version of schizoid was he was intruded upon. His mother thought she knew how to raise a child. Therefore, he would be sat in his high chair, and if he didn't eat something, and he refused to eat it, and if he went like this, I'm not, you know, and indicate he wasn't eating it, the mother would make him sit there till he ate it, and if he didn't eat it, she'd dump the bowl on his head. And then when he was little and tried to crawl away to get a toy, the mother would pick him up and put him right back. He wasn't allowed to crawl away from where she put him. So can you see how this could impact the sense of safety and autonomy of a child? He didn't have no... Pardon me?
It can make him feel quite defeated.
Yes. And however, the lack of overt... Luckily, he was a resilient person, and he was able to marry. Well, you know, we did some therapy, and at that time, I was not acquainted with schizoid. I just have fairly good instincts for when someone doesn't want to be intruded upon. I don't want to intrude, you know, that type of thing. I later learned techniques and methods and why, you know, but I had the instinct to know who I could ask something, or I don't really have a need to control anybody but myself. I have a low need for control, and I think that suited me well before I even knew I was dealing with schizoid clients, because they didn't feel controlled. And I like most people, so it's really not hard to get my attention. And so another thing, I used to sometimes if someone didn't come in with something to work on, I would sometimes do an atypical introduction in the first sentence. I tried on lots of things over the years. I've been in practice since 1974. That's a long time. I had lots of continuing ed. There were lots of ideas. So one of the things I would see somebody, if someone came in and they were focused on me, I wouldn't do this. But if I noticed they were looking around the room, they were really focused on the room. And I had a lot of interesting things in this room. Besides the diplomas and the books, I had my toys. I had Tibetan bells. I had kaleidoscopes. I had, in a case, some semi-precious stones that people could use. There were all sorts of things to look at that people found kind of fascinating, and I found them fascinating. That's why they were in my room. And it was a big room. It was 19.5 by 19.5 with 2 big windows. So if they were looking around and their focus wasn't so much on me, I would ask them, "What do you notice?" And they say, "What do you mean?" I said, "Is this something that grabs your attention? I see you looking around a lot, either because you like it, or it just grabs your attention, or you hate it." And if they said yes, I said, "Would you be willing to try an experiment that I found to be useful?" Again, I'm asking permission. I'm not telling them we're going to do this thing. I'm asking. If they said no, I wouldn't do it. You know, I would just continue and take a history. So what's the experiment? And you can try it for yourself. You can I would have them, I'd say, okay, I'm going to do it with something that's really clear now between a borderline and narcissistic, because two different people, one with a narcissist who turned out to be an exhibitionist narcissist, and one who turned out to have a schizoid adaptation, picked the same object. And I remember what they said.
Okay,
So I'll do the narcissist first so you can see the real difference. The narcissist said, I'm your diplomas. I tell the world that you are better than them. I show how smart you are. I show how capable you are. I love being up here and looking down on them because they were high, okay? Now, I have this client who's going to turn out to be schizoid. They're looking around the room. They're at the diplomas. I tell them the same thing. They say, well, I'm looking at this one diploma up there on your wall. And I tell them, I offer the exercise. They say, I'm this diploma on the wall. I'm trapped here. I'm in a frame. I can't move. I can't leave. I can't connect with anyone. People can see me, but we can't make contact.
That makes so much sense.
Okay. So you can find an object for yourself in your room. It doesn't matter what you just have to be honest with yourself. You don't have to tell anyone else. We used to do this as an exercise in training class. They passed around a light bulb. And each of us in turn heard each other be the light bulb. I'm the light bulb. And one person, but we all were doing our best to be vulnerable and open and honest. So you'll be by yourself. So you can be as honest as you can be and notice the language, because you're going to learn something about yourself. You don't have to share it with anyone else, but it's an interesting exercise.
Do you know what? It's interesting because sometimes I not very often, but I felt drawn to a certain object, and one time I found it's a key quite similar to the one on your book, one of these sort of old-fashioned keys. Yeah. And I've got one on my wall, but you can't really see it. It's back there, but it's blurry. Yeah. And I put the key a long time ago, years ago. I bought that key. And so when I saw that on the book, I thought, yeah. And then also, I got this, it's like a chest. And I found that I don't know, I just really resonated with it. And I don't usually buy things objects, or don't really usually feel much connection to objects at all, really. So when you're saying it's just making me think a little bit that maybe sometimes there is something a little bit deeper going on than just, a surface attraction.
Yes, I actually found out about myself through objects. I didn't know anything I knew some things about myself. That's an exaggeration. But I was really, I was so busy trying to adjust to my situations in my family and on my own that there was no time for self-discovery. And many of you may have found that your parents weren't that interested in discovering who you are. They wanted obedience, they wanted you to love them, but they weren't spending any time helping you discover what you really liked authentically. So what I did is, from about college on, because I had no money before college or very little to buy anything, I found that I looked at what I had bought because I was attracted to it, small collections of things. And I looked at what I read, and I looked at the movies I watched, and it was like different parts of myself were being expressed. What do I mean? The thing that I had the most collections of, one was cold-blooded things like little alligators, crocodiles, or lizards. I love the S-curves of lizards. I rather fancied snakes, but not to the extent that I liked lizards. Or boxes. I thought I was collecting tarot cards, and therefore I was buying the boxes for the cards, but I ended up with box collections. But looking at the lizards, I realized this said something about me. What does it say? I was cold-blooded. My cold-blooded part of me, there was a part that it turned out to be a protectress part of my personality, had not had the leisure or the luxury to have feelings or to express feelings or to be soft. I had to survive. Now, some of you may know this if you know something about my history, but my family dissolved many times and I was abandoned many times. And by 16, I was homeless on the streets of New York, living by my wits, with no winter coat and holes in my shoes. And I did various jobs to earn money. And then I crashed where I felt safe. Okay. So I had to sleep with one eye open, and there was very little to eat. I loved folk music. I found that to be my music in the 60s, and that's why I stayed there. And there were lots of runaways and homeless kids in the 60s. So we'd crash together to be reasonably safe, and we were also freezing. It was cold, and we'd eat whatever the cafes would serve us. I worked for $2 a day, $2 a night, plus tips. Okay. So, this has effect on people. The effect it had on me was to first of all, I have very unexpected effect, and some of you will understand this. Life was easier as an abandoned 16-year-old girl on the streets of New York, as tough as it was, than it was with my parents taking charge of me.
Wow.
I was having much more fun than any time in my life, and I felt safer in many ways. The people in Greenwich Village at that time was like going to a halfway house. I knew I wasn't grown. I knew I couldn't exist uptown, holding, normal jobs. I wasn't an adult. But in this place where people were half crazy, most of them really, and there was great music, and there were guitar players, I could enjoy myself. But these cafes didn't serve full meals. I only worked at one of my last ones, it's still there, the Olive Tree on McDougal Street, was the only one that didn't have good music. So they mostly had cannolis. So we had coffee, Coke, or cannolis. And things like that, Italian pastries, because Bleecker Street with the Italian bakeries was right nearby. So going back to my alligators, I put aside, I still had empathy. I always had empathy, but I tried to shut as much of it down because my brain needed to be coldly assessing the odds that this place was safe and the person I was going to be locked up with for the night would not rape me. That's what my alligators did for me. I have a part of me that's cold-bloodedly assessing all the time. However, one day I noticed a picture of cows in a lavender metal frame, frilly frame, 2 cows, a black and white cow, a brown and white cow. I went by it twice and I said, I want to buy that. I didn't know why I wanted to buy it at first. I allowed myself to buy it. And then I figured out, oh my God, I'm a mammal. I finally am warm-blooded. Some warm-blooded side has come out. And when I will tell you, my cold-blooded side has different reading habits, and I have other sides to my personality that I discovered since then. And I appointed, with all the different sides, I appointed one the MC, the master of ceremonies. once I realized what was going on, that these were all parts of me, and that when my mood shifted, different parts came out. And I don't have dissociative identity disorder. I mean, normal people have different parts to them, and different sides develop for different reasons, sometimes for safety purposes, sometimes for other purposes. And some of my favorite parts are, I love being the fairy godmother. I discovered this because in the Disney movies, everybody wanted to be the princess. Everybody wanted to be the prince. I wanted to be the fairy godmother and grant wishes. And that's what I get to do to some extent. I'm a fairy godmother, but I'm also an assassin. Over there on my right is an imaginary guy. He's dressed in a zoot suit from the 40s, slick and silver, and all he does all day is sharpen a knife. He waits to be called on. Over my left shoulder is a golem. A golem is a mythological being that a rabbi in a town that was going to have a pogrom and all the Jews were going to be destroyed. He was a great mystic, and out of clay, he was able to, before Frankenstein ever had a monster, he made a monster to protect, large clay monster. And he said sacred words to make it alive so it would protect and to undo it. Well, I have this brute over my other shoulder. Over here, I found a crying little girl that I take care of. She's no longer crying, but it was a big surprise to find her. And Mother Teresa as a side of me, my saint side. I want to save everybody. But my hobby was leprosy as a child, one of my hobbies. So I could see reflected in my hobbies, in my collections, who I was. So I'm not going to tell you who you are. You can find out who you are by looking at your reading list of favorite books. Or is there any movie that you've seen more than once? If you've seen it more than once, you've seen it for a reason. Now, I'll leave it at that. Pansy, does that?
It's food for thought, yeah. And have we frozen?
Pardon me?
You're back. You're moving now. Sorry, your camera was frozen for a minute, but you're back now. So, are you saying that you are coming to the end of the interview?
No, I'm just wanting to check with you because I've gone in a lot of different directions and there's a lot to say about Schizoid.
Yeah, I was just processing everything. No, it's a lot. It's a lot there. So
how's it going, Pansy?
Good. I wanted to show you someone. Hold on.
Oh my.
Yeah. There you go.
Hi.
Yeah, I have a alligator as well. All right. Just a little coincidence, a little bit of synchronicity for you. All right.
There it
So
is. Yes.
we can carry on. All right.